We are live. So yeah, I honestly picking for this was 10 times difficult. 10 times more difficult for me than picking for the drafts we did on your channel.
Yeah. There's
Like it no doubt in my mind was like or it was like I kept second guessing and like really like I felt like I had to fish for people to throw on books that I would want at Marvel currently from DC. It was a bit of a hassle.
yeah, I'm gonna be repetitive, I think, on some of these creative teams because like there's just not nothing good from the most of my there's slim pickings with DC right now. Really slim.
Yeah.
And
We got a couple folks in the chat. I'd mentioned you were setting up. Scott Evans says blame Canada.
yeah.
We got our guy Nerdy Blurb TV. Ryan, man, thank you for stopping by. It's good to see you. Tell Hillum 29. Good to see you, Comic Boom.
Good to see you guys.
Nerdy Blurb, yeah, man. StreamYard is really great. I'm like, if I were really ringing in the income, I would be so down for the subscription because there are a lot of cool perks. I know Boom got it, but yeah, it is a nice setup. It's definitely a better alternative than Google Hangouts.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We got a longtime viewer, some Okie dude in the chat saying hi. What's going on, man? Good to see you. Tell Hillam got a good one. How about you pick all the bad story writers at DC Comics? Yeah, I feel like that would be easy. That would be an easy thing to do at current point. I mean even like I don't know. It was a rough one, you know. Just the talent pool at DC is not what it was 2-3 years ago.
Yeah, this is a punishment on Marvel by us. We would be fired immediately if we were pointed these. Honestly, I can't think of a single. Well, I shouldn't say that. There might be some improvements, but I actually, of all the titles that we're going to be dealing with, I don't think we're going to be improve. I know I'm not going to be improving any of the titles. Quite frankly, I would leave the current Marvel team up on all of them. That's I hate to say that about DC's current creative output, but man, yeah, that's just the way it is. But you know what? There's a reason why Dan Didio got fired, right? So here we go.
Well, we don't know. We'll see. We'll see whether or not this was kind of just corporate bodies playing games with DC Comics, or whether or not the best interests of DC are actually at heart. Telehillam says, "Let them take Adam Glass. Not too impressed with his Teen Titans run. I am behind, but I'm not gonna lie. I was into the Teen Titans run last I read. I thought that he had some really really good creative ideas, and I liked the kind of changing of the guard with the Teen Titans. I think we've talked about it before. You were somewhat fond of the Teen Titans run as well at some point, right?
Oh yeah. Well, actually, it's gotten better. Damian was too dark in the Teen Titans run, and that was my number one complaint. It was still kind of entertaining because I did like the new I like the new character, the new Crush, and I mean there's I always forget that idiot blue bouncing fat kid on there. Forget his
Yeah.
name all the time, but he's entertaining actually, and the rapport. Adam Glass is pretty good at doing a team dynamic. I think where Adam Glass lost his way is that he he actually I think he misunderstands. He's slowly starting to figure out that Damian is not supposed to be written dark. Damian is a narcissistic adult trapped in a 13-year-old body, but he shouldn't be written like a dark, brooding adult. He's
Yeah.
still a kid, and that's what Adam Glass is now just starting to remember in the last few issues, and that's
Well,
why it's gotten better.
well, part of the joke is that he's trying to be dark and brooding, but he's utterly failing because he's 13 and a narcissist. Like he doesn't
Well,
quite understand why his father is intimidating, and he's.
Well, that yeah, I guess that might be true. I guess for me, it doesn't. It's not coming across that way to me. It's
Hmm.
not. It's just coming across as, dare I say it? I won't. Adam Glass is a good writer. He's paid his dues. So I'm not going to call him a bad writer. He's a good writer. He's much better than Bendis. although that's not much of a compliment. But no, Adam Glass he's done a reasonably good job. I just think the story was just wrong. It was just a poor choice of story, and just he's got to get on track. We got to get more into the heads to know these characters, to know, put them in school. Don't put them in these ridiculous adventures. Put them in school, humanize them a little bit more, build on their relationships. What about their parents? What about, remember that they're still teenagers. And that's one thing that DC has always fundamentally failed, I think, on their teen books is they've forgotten about the larger family and the families and individual characters. And you can compare. I don't want to digress too much, but I always like how with Spider-Man and you always get a sense of his personal life. And to me, Teen Titans, we should be getting a lot more of that. But
well, yeah.
anyways,
The thing that a lot of writers forget about Teen Titans is that they try to make them a mini Justice League when really the Teen Titans are, it's a drama. It's a cast drama, and you're putting that within the context of teenagers who also have, stupendously incredible abilities and to some level responsibility, an immense responsibility. So it should be playing with that concept that we don't often see anymore with Teen Titans. So, but I guess we can get this rolling. So for everybody who's new here and for those who have been to my channel before, welcome to Let's Talk Comics. This is the comic book discussion show where myself and another co-host in the comic book community, usually, of course, my comic book comrade, ComicBoom, discuss one of the many facets of the storytelling medium that is comics. Whether it be stories, creators, characters, constructs, adaptations, we pretty much hit it all. This week, we're going to be talking about, and it's less of a topic and more of kind of a thought exercise. We're going to be approaching drafting DC Comics creators to Marvel. This is essentially going to be the sister show to what we did on ComicBoom, ComicBoom's channel, and you can find the link to his channel in the description below. I think, for those of you who joined us early, this is going to be a lot more of a challenge than what we did on his channel. But of course, let my good friend ComicBoom introduce himself to you guys, for those of you who may not know.
Oh Lord. Well, I'm ComicBoom. I've just a longtime collector. I love DC Comics mostly. I'm a fan of Marvel too, but I'm more of a DC guy. And yeah, I have a channel. I review comic books, again, mostly DC. And I bitch, whine, and complain, and I rave and I rant like everyone else on YouTube. I'm unapologetic about it because why? What's there to apologize for? I'm just a fan, and when I bitch and complain, it's from a fan perspective. So the criticism can always be levied against me that I don't know what I'm talking about because I don't know what it's like to write a comic book, and I don't know how to edit one. But guess what? I know how to read one, and I know crap when I read it. So therefore, that's my resume to be editor-in-chief, along with my good friend Dark Knight for Marvel Comics.
Yeah, me over here actually applying to work in editorial. Also me. Makes a stream, taking over CB Cebulski's job. Easy way to shoot for the stars. We got Just Rican and his comics popping through. What's going on, my guy? Good to see you. It's been a long time. All right. So I think, without further delay, we should get into the topic. Obviously, drafting DC Comics characters to Marvel. Let's get it started with our star-spangled Captain America. ComicBoom, since you're the guest, I'm curious to know, what DC Comics creators are you inflicting upon Captain America?
Well, actually, this was my easiest choice. And maybe this is a cheat, but for both writer and artist, I'm going Sean Gordon Murphy.
That's a good pick.
Yeah, I figure that, right now with I always say his name wrong. I apologize to him, even though he'll never watch this. But Ta-Nehisi Coates. What?
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a huge fan of his current Captain America run. I know Dark Knight, you're more favorable to it. You and I had a debate about that, about 6 months ago. Mm-hmm. I'm still not really capturing his what the points that he's trying to make. I'm not a big fan of what he's done for Captain America, but I do respect him as a social commentator in other areas. But in any event, Sean Gordon Murphy, I think, has a very, I mean, is there anybody who doesn't like at some level his Curse of the White Knight and White Knight? I mean, it's a great series, and Sean Gordon Murphy has that gift where he can really take a perspective and he can sort of take a different angle and look at things. Quite frankly, I think of Sean Gordon Murphy as, in many ways, similar to Ta-Nehisi Coates, but better because it's more entertaining. It's less political in a sense, and it's a little bit more dramatic, and it's more visceral, and it's more
Mm.
powerful, and it's more direct, and it's impactful of its plot lines and storylines, and you combine that with his art. I mean, he's got a really good handle, and he's got a capacity to take a unique approach to the characters. He's got a unique spin in Curse of the Dark Knight on, of course, Harley Quinn, and on Batman himself and the Batman family, and in particular with Azrael. And I think, wouldn't that be awesome to have his creative mind sort of reimagining Captain America, even if it involved taking Captain America in an alternate universe for a while. I mean, we'd upset some Marvel fans, but I mean, Marvel, who cares about Marvel continuity? We know it's all linear. So, they're all, so it's no big deal. So anyways, that's what I would do with that.
That was a really interesting pick. It's definitely not, it's not one that I ever would have thought of, but I really like it. You make a very good point because there's something about Captain America that will always kind of be inherently political, more on like a civil rights, kind of stance. And I think that is an excellent choice because Sean Gordon Murphy not only knows how to craft really great drama and action, he's really good at interweaving that, that more I would say topical stance on the world in his comics, and it feels much more subtle than what most people are able to do out there. I think that was a great pick. I think he's a versatile artist that also kind of has a style that makes him completely individual and unique. That was a great pick. Sean Gordon Murphy was not one that I would have thought of for Captain America, but I'm definitely not opposed to it at all. For me, I
Yeah, what do you do?
honestly, for me, Captain America might have been my easiest pick because the writer in question has proven a long-standing love of history, of American war stories, and that's Robert Venditti. The guy knows how to craft war stories. And whether or not Captain America is directly fighting on the front lines or he's fighting the more political, the more socialized war on the streets of New York, there's still war involved. Robert Venditti did a phenomenal job in his Homeland Directive. It's an independent comic book. I have it somewhere over here. And obviously, we have his Freedom Fighters that he did for DC, which was also excellent. I think that he does a great job at capturing character. The guy does his research. I think we're going to get Steve Rogers' voice 100% accurate. And on top of that, the guy just knows how to tell this type of story. It's in his wheelhouse. And I think he would do an excellent job. For art, I kind of have a double side. And if you guys have seen my current review of Batman's issue number 86 to 89, which you can find on the channel, we had a Deathstroke artist, Carlo Pagulayan, on issue 89 of Batman. And even though I did find some flaws in the writing, I think Carlo Pagulayan is a very, very dynamic artist, very smooth rendering. So I think we're going to get a little bit of that not even that. We're going to get depth, we're going to get dimension, and on top of that, the action is going to look cinematic, and I think that's something that you need to do in Captain America. On top of that, he's excellent at character acting and making his characters emote and have gestures and feelings. So that's my pick for Captain America.
Okay, I know. Are you hearing some static on your end?
It sounded like you were typing on a keyboard.
No, I'm not I'm not doing anything on my end.
Oh,
no. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but I'm starting to get some static.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I'm not. Nothing's happening on mine. It should be. It should be better now.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's
In any
definitely.
event, yeah, that's a great choice. Yeah, got
Um,
nothing really to add to that. It's yeah.
all right. So I think so first off, I'm really curious, everybody that's watching live in the chat, feel free to let us know what your pick for Captain America would be. I'm really interesting. How do you guys feel about our picks? Are we crazy? Do you like them? Do you maybe want to switch a writer or an artist out? Let us know. I guess we'll have to go through. We're still getting some static from you over there.
I don't think it was from me. My mic's not hooked up. I'm just using the phone like I normally did before. So I don't. I got nothing hooked up anymore. I'm just using my phone.
Huh. That's weird.
Yeah, I don't.
All right. Well, hopefully it's not too much of a nuisance for everybody watching, whatever it is. So I guess we got to go through Marvel's Trinity. Let's move on to Thor. Thor has obviously become a massively high-profile character at Marvel between the cinematic universe and Jason Aaron taking over the character and building upon that mythology. ComicBoom, who are you putting on Thor?
I put James Tiny in the fourth on Thor for the writer, and for the artist, I'm going with Ivan Reis.
That's an interesting pick.
Yeah, Ivan Reis is he's an amazing artist on Superman. He you know he does facial expressions very well, which I think would bode well for Thor, because Thor is always screaming at the top of his lungs, and Thor has never been a particularly bright individual. He's always been kind of like an idiot, and he always seems to, he always seems to get his way through just slamming his hammer at things. And Ivan Reis is perfectly good at throwing the hammer down artistically, and James Tiny in the fourth is really good at those long epics that take a. He's James Tiny in the fourth. Sometimes he suffers from too much exposition, and I know that you had recently criticized James Tiny in the fourth for perhaps avoiding showing some fight scenes in his recent Batman arc, and but nonetheless, he is very good, I believe, at coming up with some very good ideas, and he is good at coming up with some great Batman toys and Batman. He can throw a couple curveballs in a story, and you want an artist to be able to capitalize on that. And Ivan Reis is someone who's very versatile as an artist, that he can really do that. And I think that James Tynion, he's got a lot of experience with Scott Snyder with Justice League. And while the opinion on Justice League's 39 issues, opinions might vary on that, the reality is that he's used to thinking big. He's used to thinking about universe-wide epic adventures. And Thor is a title that I think is sort of a galaxy-spanning type of mythological hero that could be placed in different settings, and Tinian the Force the guy to make that happen.
I think it's an interesting pick. One that I wouldn't necessarily have thought of. I mean, Tynan's a great writer. For as much as I nitpicked on his Batman run, I am liking it so far. I am a big fan of him as a writer. I don't know if I would necessarily put him on Thor, but again, to kind of alleviate that pressure, we did kind of openly admit that putting current DC writers and that talent pool on Marvel titles is going to be pretty difficult for us. So, for me, I did consider Ivan Reis at this title at one point, but I decided to put somebody else on there. For me, Thor obviously has to have a writer that is willing to go big, build on mythology, but also really take part in approaching one aspect of Thor and making that kind of a central theme of his book. Obviously Jason Aaron pushed on the mythology and questioned what it meant to be worthy. And based on this person and how well they did with Wonder Woman, I put Brian Azzarello on Thor. I think whether or not he has a big, long run, I think Azzarello would really, really push into the Viking mythology of Thor, probably put his own stamp on it to some degree. But as much as we have a great regal King Thor, he is a warrior. He is a Viking warrior. And I think Brian Azzarello would really dig into that, make it gruesome, make it dark, a little bit ominous. It would be an interesting direction for Thor. Whether or not he's able to pull it off, I think the intrigue is there. And for me, art-wise, no doubt I'd throw Eddie Barrows on that book. Eddie Barrows is an incredible artist. He's great at drama, great at setting up his panel layouts to make it feel cinematic, and his rendering style is very soft and painterly, and I think that lends really well to Thor. But with that, a lot of artists who are soft and painterly aren't able to really create as dynamic art in terms of like the action and things of that nature, but that's something that Eddie Barrows can do. I own 2 original pages from Barrows. I think he's phenomenal, and I think he would absolutely do a phenomenal job on Thor.
That's I honestly I got Eddie Burrows on another title. Azzarello is someone who I also have another title, but hearing you talk about him for Thor, that's an excellent choice. That is really, he's another guy. Azzarello is another guy that I loved him on Wonder Woman. I know a lot of people were a lot. I think that the fan base is divided on Azzarello's work on Wonder Woman during the New 52, but quite frankly, I thought if you're going to make Wonder Woman just a little bit darker and give her a little bit of an edge, Azzarello was perfect on Wonder Woman. I mean, he even made her, he made headlines when he made Wonder Woman call another character a bitch. I mean, but I loved it because he's not afraid. I mean, bear in mind, Azzarello's Batwang guy. He makes Wonder Woman say bitch, and he exposes Batman's penis. Oh my God. This is called pushing the envelope nowadays in this politically correct times, but it is what it is. I like Azzarello. He's got an attitude in interviews. He can be a tough guy to interview, but nonetheless, he's very blunt. He's straightforward. He's a smartass. He's what you want on Thor, and I think he's perfect because in many ways, I think he's got sort of a Viking kind of attitude, quite frankly. He even looks like a Viking, for God's sakes.
Well, I think the cool thing about Azzarello and why I think he would fit Thor is because in terms of his kind of penchant to go dark and gritty and a little bit vicious, that's definitely a side of Thor that is prevalent, right? Like there is going to be no headline for Thor calling somebody a wench because Thor at times lets those kind of negative, more aggressive emotions get the best of him. And I think that whether or not this story is, a story in the past where maybe he can really play to Thor's arrogance and that kind of bloodlusty, trying to prove himself warrior prince, or whether or not it's in the present, I think he would do a really interesting job. And again, Barrows is just like the perfect combination of what I think a Thor artist should be. There are a couple really good suggestions. Some Moki dude, is thinking Fiona Staples on art for Thor with writing by Venditti. I think that's an interesting pick as well.
Very good, yeah.
And a statement that I'd like to echo too from Solo Rebirth. Thank you for joining us, man. It says that DC has talent, but some aren't doing anything, and that's a fact. DC does have some decent talent, but the reason I think that Boom and I had an issue with trying to find appropriate and fitting spots for them at Marvel is that A, most of them aren't doing anything, and B, to be honest, most of them aren't currently putting out anything that screams, evergreen or high quality, and as much as I like a lot of these guys, I don't really think many of them are doing anything at DC that's pressing or that I feel the need to pick up as soon as it hits the shelves.
Yeah, no, you make a very good point. Nothing right now. I think, in fairness, DC is it's just at a creative low point, and it's not even so much that the creators aren't capable of writing better. I know they're capable of writing better. I think it's the mood. I think it's just these things are cyclical. In my view, we saw the same thing in Marvel in 2017. They were at a creative low point, I thought. And then all it takes is a little bit of inspiration, and you get some better stories and some better stories from the same writers. And right now, I think that, especially now, we might not be able to expect much from DC in the next, year, who knows? I mean, the fallout from Didio, it might be positive, it might be negative, but if they're going to be hiring other people from other outside the traditional comic book field, there's going to be a lot of more wild card writers out there that we're going to be experiencing, and it might have an ill effect or a positive effect on the books that we're going to be reading. But like I said, these thought exercises that you and I engage in, that we're sharing with people, they are kind of fun, but they do underscore the difficulties involved when we play this thought game.
And one important thing to kind of consider too is the vacuum of power currently at DC, right? Like if DC is giving Bendis, for example, all of this control to alter the universe with, his event Leviathan or Superman, it doesn't give a lot of room for some of these kind of talents that have a little bit less of a stature and a pull at DC to do what they want to do. So, I'm not 100% putting the blame on these creators. It is, in fact, also the editorial structure. And again, that sort of vacuum of power that DC is allowing certain creators to have. Boom and I, and I think I can speak for the both of us, people that we're putting on these books because we are fans of them. We respect them as creators, although they're not putting out the level of quality at the moment that we are used to from them. And, to a degree, there may be some mitigating circumstances that we're not aware of. So I just think that was important to mention. Moving on to the next draft, we're going through Marvel's Trinity. Let's go through Iron Man. Comic Boom, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm going to say something that's, I don't know, might be controversial. This might be there might be a lot of people, given this man's very divisive, controversial run on Batman, people might be stunned that Marvel's new editor-in-chief, ComicBoom, would put Tom King on Iron Man, but that is what I would do.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I would put Tom King on Iron Man is that I do think that Tom King will have learned some hard lessons on Batman. And I do think that he would tighten up his narrative. I think that Tom King is a very good writer who's got very good ideas, and he is capable of tightening up his story but he needs stronger editorial control, and he can't be given the power. I would not let Tom King tell me to fire an editor like Didio did when Tom King got upset with one editor and they fired him and replaced him with one that was more beholden to King. Nonsense. I'd hire Tom King and I'd say, look, this is what we're going to do. Tell us your ideas. I'm going to give you 12 issues. What's your vision? And he seems to bloom. Tom King seems to bloom if you say 12 issues. And look what he's done with, Mr. Miracle, all the ones that have got critical acclaim, the Vision, the Sheriff of Babylon, even when he was told to wrap up Batman, he in 12, 13 issues, City of Bane, it was somewhat of an abortion of a storyline, but at least he wrapped things up, and it is what it is. And I think, frankly, Tony Stark is a character that Tony Stark is a character that is so flawed in so many ways. So many people love to hate Tony Stark. Because he's kind of a jerk. Some people call him an asshole. He's very divisive. They've even replaced Tony Stark with his Arnold Stark now is his cousin or some damn thing.
His brother.
His brother, sorry. And it's one of those things that I like. I like Tom King. If anybody can explore a side of Tony Stark that we haven't seen before and upset the fans a little bit by challenging their sensibilities, it's Tom King. And that would be one of my more maybe divisive picks, but I'd do it. In terms of an artist, I would put current Justice League Dark's artist Martino Bueno on there. He currently draws Justice League Dark. And the reason why I chose that is he works good. I picture Iron Man being under Tom King a little bit of a darker tale, a little bit more with some maybe darker tones. But Martino Bueno is very good at expressions. He's very good at action sequences. And I see that this being almost maybe a psychological exploration of Tony Stark. Tony Stark's done a lot of crazy crap in his life, and I see Tom King really exploring that with the consequences of that psychologically on Tony Stark. When you think of all that he's been through in Civil War II, almost dying, his latest arc with Dan Slott, and he's now, we're not, wherever the hell he is now because his brother's taken over. When he comes back, he needs a psychological pull down, and Tom King's the one to give it to him. And Martino Bueno is the artist to make it happen.
You know what's really funny? I almost made the Tom King pick for Iron Man as well. So I can definitely see the appeal. And I think something to take note of is as much as Iron Man has kind of become a titan because of the cinematic universe, his comics don't sell. People don't buy Iron Man comics. And the thing about the character in comics is, if you ask a diehard Marvel fan, for the most part, for a recommendation of 5 of Iron Man's greatest stories, I can pretty much promise you most of them might give you 3. One of them being Civil War, which wasn't necessarily like just an Iron Man story. It was much grander than that. I think Tom King would really explore the trauma of Tony Stark. Obviously alcoholism has played a huge role in Tony Stark's life. I think obviously Tony Stark's potential to explore, post-traumatic stress would be something that Tom King can play without forcing it on a character. And I think just knowing that in the comics, Tony Stark's, I guess, lack of platform within the actual comic books universe gives Tom King a little bit more room to play.
Yeah.
The one thing that worries me is that he goes, more on the Heroes in Crisis route with Iron Man. But I really do think that, you give, again, Tom King a limited start and end point, 12 issues. I think that he could really knock an Iron Man story out of the park. So I think that you had a really, really interesting pick there, Boom. For me, like I said, I did consider Tom King on Iron Man, but I actually ended up going with Greg Rucka. I think Greg Rucka would do some really interesting things with Iron Man. One of them being, I think, kind of adding a very espionage, tech-based spy flair to Iron Man, right? Like, I think that you can explore Iron Man going on missions as not necessarily an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but at least tonally something along those lines. I mean, you know what I mean? Iron Man can be international. Iron Man can be worldwide. I think it would be a really interesting thing to explore. Greg Rucka knows character. Greg Rucka knows how to create stories and drama, which I think Tony Stark needs real drama in comics. That's not just spectacle because of his kind of name recognition on the film. People tend to really only go spectacle with Iron Man. I think we just need some really hearty stories. And I think that's something that Greg Rucka is going to give us. For art, I had to pick somebody dynamic, somebody who's going to make every book feel cinematic. Somebody that's going to do all of Tony Stark's wonderful toys justice. And I picked Dexter Soy. I had to go Dexter Soy. I know not a hell of a lot of people are reading his Batman and the Outsiders, and say what you want about the writing being a little bit decompressed in the story. The art is awesome. He has a really cool, strong, identifiable aesthetic to his designs, but also the way he lays out pages, the way he sets up panels, the way he has certain things go out of one panel and into another panel, kind of breaking that wall. I think he's very dynamic. I think he would make the book feel very lifelike. And he's also really interesting when it comes to textures. And obviously, Iron Man with all of his gadgets and stuff, there's a lot of cool visual things to explore there. So, yeah, my pick is Greg Rucka and Dexter Soy on Iron Man.
I love the choice of. I love Greg Rucka. I love Greg Rucka's writing. And Dexter Soy is a fantastic artist, highly underrated, arguably one of the best artists at DC. You make a great choice. I'm embarrassed to say that I never put Dexter Soy on my list. And I'm embarrassed to say that it's only because I just plumb forgot about him. So I don't have any excuse. I just forgot about him. But that's an excellent choice. I could probably, replace right now, pencil out some of the ones I did choose, but I'll stick with what I got. But no, that's an excellent choice. Greg Rucka, he's always a great, he he's always a wild card that you can put on a title, and he's going to do something decidedly different. And sometimes he hits it out of the park, and sometimes he'll hit it out of the park and he'll have a run like he had on Wonder Woman for DC, and then other times he'll have a run like he did on Punisher with Marvel, where Wolverine, nobody likes Rucka's Wolverine run, because he made Logan short and stumpy, like Logan was supposed to originally conceived as. But Rucka himself always jokes about how nobody likes his Wolverine run. But in any event, no, that's a great choice. And you mentioned Rucka about his espionage angle. That's precisely why, and you could probably guess why I chose Rucka for another title that we'll get to. But no, that was a good choice.
Yeah, and I think that with Rucka kind of being firm and taking a direction, I think it's something that Iron Man needs, because I don't really think Marvel knows what they want to do with Iron Man in the comics. It's one of those things where a lot of the and I don't like using this term so much, but I guess I'll use it anyways. The normies that watch the MCU, say that, oh, Robert Downey Jr. was the perfect Iron Man. He was perfect from the comics. No, he wasn't. He was so good. He redefined Tony Stark in the comics. After Robert Downey Jr., people started making Iron Man more like Robert Downey Jr. So I think that that's an important thing to take note. And I think that comic book Tony Stark needs to have a direction and needs to go somewhere. And I think Greg Rucka is the guy to do it. And I think, you also had a really good pick for an introspective Iron Man run that I think it's something that Tony deserves as a character. So I think that was really, really, really. I think I like both of our picks on that one. I thought they were solid.
Yeah. No, and in fact, it's funny because as we're talking here, I'm actually discovering, it's occurring to me as listening to you talk with your reasoning, and even as I sort of talk out and flush out my own thoughts, I'm slowly developing, as we're talking here, a better appreciation for DC's talent pool.
Same. I was thinking
which I never had, because it's and I think maybe that's just because of the mood that DC has been in the last year or so. So maybe this is good that we're having this discussion, and we can maybe have a little bit brighter, more optimism moving forward.
Yeah, you make a great point. I was thinking the same way partway through, but I guess I was a little bit ashamed to admit it on my own. So I'm glad you broke the ice on that one. Yeah, I think part of it is definitely like where that vacuum of power is at DC in the editorial structure. I mean, Marvel's editorial is very mixed, but the thing is, I feel like for the most part, because of the linearity of their timeline, they'll kind of let most creators just go and do what they want to do, rather than saying, hey, you can't do this on a character because I'm letting Bendis reveal his identity, or I'm, things of that nature. So I think that, maybe just the difference in the editorial style at Marvel, not necessarily saying it's better as a whole. It just might allow these DC creators to do what they want to do. So, that I'm glad you mentioned that. I really am. I think moving in, another one of Marvel's, kind of I guess the fourth name you have to mention on this list when you're going Cap, Iron Man, Thor, is the Hulk. I think the Hulk has obviously had a great couple of years under Al Ewing. So me picking somebody for Hulk also had to be out of the box. I had to pick someone who I think was going to do something crazy, but I'll go into that after. I'm really curious, ComicBoom, who is your pick to take on the Hulk?
Well, my pick for the Hulk, and I thought it almost felt like so obvious to me in my own mind. I thought this was cliche given my sensibilities, but putting Azzarello on the Hulk is something that it just came naturally to me, and it might be a little bit of a cheat because it might not, because I think it's important that if we're going to be taking Al Ewing off the Hulk, which we're going to get backlash from that, Azzarello I see as being very capable of taking those controversial storylines that Al Ewing has explored and really going the extra mile and putting a difference, and either doubling down on the darkness, or Azzarello, I think, and Al Ewing, I think they're compatible in terms of maybe that level of darkness, or that creative way of looking at a character with some darker tones and with a different approach. And as I don't know if Azzarello would want to write the Hulk, but I'd want to see it. I'd want to give him the opportunity to do it. And as for uh, as for the artist, I I actually was this. I would have to change this one up, but I was actually thinking that I was inclined to go with Eddie Burroughs. Uh, Actually, it's not bad. Eddie Burroughs in his Freedom Fighters, he's really good at drawing some darker. Because Freedom Fighters, that was written by Venditti, it just finished his 12-issue run. Eddie Burroughs in that title is really good because it's kind of a darker story. The Freedom Fighters, they fight Nazis. They call them Razzies in the comic book because they're too afraid to say the word Nazi in this day and age for some bloody reason. But in any event, there were some darker stories there. It was I don't know if you're seeing this, you're disappearing from my end, but in any event, there's some darker stories there that I think Eddie Burroughs would be very good at drawing, and that's my pick. I think that both Azzarello and Eddie Burroughs would do an excellent job
So
on Hulk, and that's what I expect them to do.
having
Uh,
some, it
are you
looks like
hearing what
a
I'm saying?
stream. No, you cut off a little bit. I I got a little message from StreamYard just saying that they were experiencing some difficulties. Um,
Oh, okay.
I can I
Yeah,
can see
I'm
you.
not
I
sure.
can see you now though.
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. I'm still hearing static, and I know I I'm not hearing any static when I'm talking. When I'm not talking and you're talking, I hear static. But I don't know if do you hear static when I'm talking? So it might be both ways too. I'm not sure what's going on there.
Yeah,
I It's weird.
I can hear static a little bit when you're talking, but I'm sorry. Let's. It looks like everybody can hear us. So, boom. Do you want to just kind of backtrack a little bit and
Okay. Yeah, I was just saying that I chose Azzarello and Eddie Burroughs as the creative team. Eddie Burroughs did a great job with Freedom Fighters. Eddie Burroughs is really good at. He's very versatile. He can do bright stories, dark stories. He can work with uh, uh, more of a horror take, a darker take, and frankly, so can Azzarello. But for the Hulk, Azzarello has got. He's a wild card, and you never know what you're going to get with Azzarello. And his attitude and his sarcasm and his cynicism at times really comes through in his writing, and it makes for really great stories. In particular, I'm thinking of a western that Azzarello did called Loveless. It was by Vertigo. It was 24 issues. It was one of the most darkest western stories, 24 issues long, that you will ever read, and it's about a town called Loveless, and it ends with the town being wiped out. It has a very horror-like ending, and yet it also has ramifications for the future. It was probably one of the best Vertigo titles I ever read that nobody ever talks about. And boy, oh boy, as a sequel to Al Ewing's Immortal Hulk, Azzarello, I think, would hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I think you had a great pick because Azzarello isn't afraid to make you uncomfortable, and Hulk is one of those characters that you really need to push the needle if you're going to make it good because a lot of Hulk stories just kind of involve high impact action. And while it's an important part of the character to incorporate, it's not something that I necessarily want to continue to see stories around. And I think picking Brian Azzarello for the Hulk was a really inspired choice. That I don't know what's going on with the static. Um, but it's a really inspired choice. I think he would really dig into the trauma of the character, and I think that was awesome. I don't, man, this static. I really hope we can somewhat.
I've got mine. I got all my computers, everything shut off here except for my iPhone. So I don't know. Like I'm making sure nothing is on here, so there's no static in the background just in case. So I'm not. I don't know what else I could. What else would be causing it on my end? If it is on my end, I don't know. So
I have no idea, man. I'm like in my office, doors closed. Like I don't know. we'll try to move forward. I'm hoping, for those of you watching, let us know if the static gets too unbearable. Um, but for me, Hulk, again, I had to make a drastic pick, and this is where I put Tom King. And I think that this is by far my most controversial pick because he stems away from big cinematic action. But I think that Tom King would provide a really interesting, introspective, and psychological um, direction for Hulk. I think that we would explore Bruce Banner's emotions. I think his kind of way of writing a stunted man would fit way better for Bruce Banner Hulk than he would for Batman because the way he wrote Batman's dialogue, that monosyllabic sentence structure feels more like Hulk. But
Yeah.
I again, I'll admit this is my most controversial pick, but I think Tom King would really dig into the psychology and the emotional issues behind the Hulk and explore that. Again, Tom King is a writer I would only give 12 issues, a start and an end. My artist, just to kind of make up for the fact that Tom King doesn't necessarily write the most cinematic stuff, is to get a big, impactful, in your face artist, and that's Doug Mahnke. I would put Doug Mahnke on the Hulk. He's one of the best artists in comics if you just want to, visualize these big, hulking, Olympian titans of superheroes. He's
Yeah.
cinematic when it comes to designing the page. So I think he might be able to balance Tom King's a little bit more toned down visual writing.
Yeah, that's an excellent choice. Doug Mahnke is fantastic, and man, I know he would be able to do a fantastic Hulk, a fantastic. Yeah, that's great. Doug Mahnke, I've loved his work going all the way back to Justice League Elite. I mean, he's one of the best artists. I remember I think he even drew one of my favorite Superman stories, Truth, Justice, in the American, or Who Believes in Truth, Justice in the American Way. Just a fantastic choice on artist. And Tom King, with his psychological breakdown, him having fun with the Hulk. There's so many wild, crazy interpretations of the Incredible Hulk over the last 30 years. Having a wild, crazy 12-issue run of Tom King on the Hulk, I don't even think it would upset that many people. And even if it did, you could forget about it right away because, really, there's so many different interpretations of the Hulk as it is. And one of the reasons Al Ewing runs is so popular is that he's incorporating all of those interpretations in his run. And to rock the boat a little bit. And if we're going to take a chance on a character, why not do it on Immortal Hulk again?
Yeah, I just think to really get Hulk selling books and people buying him, I think you really need to do something different with him. And I think just aside from the fact that Al Ewing is doing an incredible job, I think that his approach is really out there. And I think that it's that in and of itself is something that attracts people to the book. And so that was kind of what inspired my choice. I think I like your choice better than mine, to be honest. I think it has a little bit more I'd be more confident in it, ahead of time, but I think that they were both pretty interesting picks. I think next, just kind of going through Marvel, we gotta hit Marvel's most popular character, and that's Spider-Man. So, ComicBoom, I'm curious, what is your creative team for Spider-Man?
I went with Adam Glass and Brett Booth. Adam Glass is the current writer of Teen Titans. We talked about Teen Titans at the beginning of the stream, and Brett Booth is the current artist on Flash Forward. Flash Forward just ended with issue 6 this past week, but Brett Booth is well known for his art on the Flash. I'm not even, to be honest with you, I personally am not a huge fan of Brett Booth as an artist, but I know many people are. Many people love his art on the Flash, and to be quite blunt, I think that his particular style I think it would be interesting for Spider-Man. And I think it would bode well for Spider-Man. He's very good with the Flash, with drawing the lightning and and getting the right colors on him to make the Flash a very colorful comic book when it's drawn by Brett Booth. And I think I would be interested to see what the ideas that Brett Booth would have drawing Spider-Man for at least a 12-issue run to see what artistic styles that he might bring in and how he might do the webbing and the swinging and the action scenes. I think that would be very interesting to give him a shot with Spider-Man, and definitely it would be sort of rocking the boat a bit. I know that when the current artist on Amazing Spider-Man, who came from Invincible, whose name
Ryan Otley.
Ryan Otley, thank you, Ryan Otley. Ryan Otley's art, I think I think it hasn't really hit me for Spider-Man, even though it was almost felt like a natural pick at the time. Um, I've got mixed feelings about Ryan Otley on Spider-Man. I think he's due for a change, but in any event, I would like Brett Booth to get a shot at it. Now, quick point on Adam Glass. I think Adam Glass is, I think he's one of the most underrated writers out there right now. I think that he has, I think that I think he hasn't hit his right stride with Teen Titans. I think he hit it early on, but then he got sidetracked. And I blame Damian Wayne on that. To me, any member of the Bat family is a blessing and a curse for any writer, because they tend to focus stories around Batman family members. And sometimes it's to the detriment of developing a whole story, or letting a story develop naturally and organically. And I think that his focus on Damian Wayne with the Teen Titans, I think it got away from him. And I think that there was a better story there to be told. I know, put Adam Glass on Spider-Man, and he's really good at a team dynamic. And I think that team dynamic would be replaced on Spider-Man with Spider-Man's family. Because Spider-Man, in many ways, I often think of Spider-Man sometimes like a team book, because Spider-Man is such a fantastic family with his Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson and Gwen Stacy and Mary Jane Watson. They almost seem to be a team in a sense, but they're not a team. And I think that Adam Glass would be a very interesting pick for that. And I would at least give him a 12-issue run to see if he found his stride. And I wouldn't give him much more than that, though, because I think when you're writing Spider-Man, you got to hit your stride within, well, frankly, six issues, no more than 12. But it's a risk, but I'd be one that I'd be willing to take.
Yeah, I think it's a cool pick. I honestly, I also get where you're coming from on Brett Booth. I really like Brett Booth, but he has a very specific skill set. Like he's really good at making characters look really lean and kind of thin. He's not good at drawing like muscular superheroes. My biggest complaint for him is that for every single male that he draws in superhero comics has the same exact build. And the one thing that really struck me with him, like particularly, was I remember they did like a Titans annual, and like Batman and Nightwing were the same exact size. Like, no. But for Spider-Man, I think that he's really good at setting up a page, making it feel dynamic and kinetic, right? It makes it feel like something big is happening in terms of the action. And I think Adam Glass is a pretty interesting and inspired pick. Like you said, he's starting to hit his stride on Teen Titans, you feel like, and maybe that kind of tone that he's currently bringing to Teen Titans would serve Spider-Man well. For me, my pick for Spider-Man, I chose this writer based on their current trajectory at DC Comics. This writer used to be one of the best when it comes to gritty, dark, scary drama, but he's kind of shifted more towards jokey, lighthearted, dialogue, and I picked Scott Snyder for Spider-Man, and of course, art-wise, it had to be Greg Capullo. Greg Capullo does best at drawing people when they have masks. And I think, Greg Capullo is obviously one of the biggest titans in the big two comic book publishing sphere. I think that Snyder, for as much as we say that like thematically, Snyder is like, I know you have an issue with him saying, Doom wins this, that, and the other thing. But if you notice within the stories, the drama isn't like dark. Like when he's writing drama, when he's writing character interactions, he might say, this, that, and the other thing, but like there is a lot of light-hearted atmosphere to, character interactions, and he's really kind of, I think, to the detriment of a lot of his books. Like he likes to squeeze in a lot of jokes now. I feel like Spider-Man is the kind of the trajectory or Spider-Man is the endpoint for the trajectory that he seems to be going on. If we're going to talk about Snyder liking to ruin people's lives in terms of making the world choose doom, whose life is better to ruin than Peter Parker's, right? Like that is the premise of every single Peter Parker story ever, is that the world just shits on him and he gets back up. So I think Snyder would be an interesting pick. Obviously, Greg Capullo is one of the biggest guys in the industry, and I think that his style would really serve Spider-Man well. And of course, you got to have Jonathan Glapion inking him, who would add a lot of depth to New York City and dynamic texture. So that's my pick for Spider-Man.
I think it's an interesting pick. I'm not going to say that I necessarily think it's the best pick. Only because for myself, I remember when Snyder did a 9-issue Superman series where he wrote Superman, and I remember I don't know, it never really rung true for me. But hearing you defend your choice for Snyder, I think you make a lot of interesting points about you know uh, just as the angst of Peter Parker. In many ways, Snyder's become quite cynical lately. He really has, and you see it in his Justice League run. And quite frankly, knowing now what's going on behind the scenes, or at least getting a tease of it, I think by Snyder's own admission, he's had some arguments with Didio, and I think he's become a family in the last 3-4 years. Snyder's gotten a son. He's become a father. He's grown in his career. He's had some occupational battles with editorial at DC. He's become very high profile. He's become very famous in comic book circles. And I think getting his spin on Spider-Man and infusing all his personal angst, which he does, it's reflected in his writing. It really is. Snyder, more so than anyone, you really see his angst reflected in his writing, more so than a lot of writers, with the possible exception of Tom King, who's perpetually depressed and always likes to kill off characters. But at least Snyder doesn't often do that. But you make a good point that I would be curious to see how, because if anybody could write the Peter Parker luck, it would be Snyder, because Snyder would give Peter Parker a lot of bad luck in probably a very short period of time. And it would be interesting to see what he could do with it. Although I personally, as your co-editor-in-chief, I would insist that he not go more than 18 issues in telling his story.
Well, the thing with Snyder is, and I know that people kind of have this image of him based on what he's done in the past, but I don't think Snyder's the same guy that wrote the original Witches. I don't think Snyder's the same guy that wrote The Wake, and I don't think Snyder is currently the same guy that wrote The Court of Owls and Death of the Family. He is definitely positioned himself in a direction where I feel like he likes characters to say that things are big and dark, to convince you that things are big and dark, but ultimately the atmosphere that he sets is a little bit lighthearted and hokey. Like you read Metal and like Deathstroke and Aquaman go on a mission, and it's just Deathstroke fucking making jokes about Aquaman being a fish guy, or things of that nature. Like he likes to interject that kind of lightheartedness into a situation that I think should be a little bit more dark and barren. Which is why I don't think he has as much of a foothold in what people say he does regarding like the darkness, that kind of really scary, I don't have hope kind of landscape. It's simultaneously weird because what he's doing, in the sense that, like, yeah, okay, Doom won, but also this is the same guy that wrote a totally crazy, epic but non-cohesive story of, where sea gods came from wherever because they were pissed at the Atlanteans, and Superman came back with a magic leather jacket. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
there's something really out there and high flying, and I think that letting Snyder take a shot at Spider-Man might be able to kind of put bounds on that, right? Like when he's doing Justice League, he takes that kind of tone that he's trying to set, and I don't think he has a direction. Whereas Spider-Man, like Spider-Man's in New York City, right? So we get bounds. We need to keep this somewhat personal as much as this is comic books and it's out there. So I think that Spider-Man would be an interesting pick. And again, it's Greg Capullo, kind of enough said, I feel like on that part.
Yeah, no, I have no issues with the artist at all. No, it's like I say, it's a good choice. Good choices. Interesting.
Yeah, and I do want to bring up Solo Rebirth's pick of Tomasi on Spider-Man. That was a close pick for me. I almost put Tomasi on Spider-Man, and to be quite frank with you, I think Tomasi would do a better job on Spider-Man than Snyder would. And the only reason I didn't was because I already had a book for him, and I didn't want to double dip. So, okay. So we got through Spider-Man. I think the last solo character we have is Daredevil, right? Before we get into ensembles.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. Well, you want me to start?
Yes, sir.
Daredevil?
Go for it.
All right. Well, I don't think this is going to surprise you. You could probably guess what I picked on this. This isn't much of a surprise. Maybe this is a little bit cliche, but I went Greg Rucka on this. I just think this is just right in his wheelhouse. I think of Greg Rucka's work on Gotham Central, even with Lois Lane, which I'm actually enjoying Lois Lane. Greg Rucka's worked on even his Black Magic. It just reminds me. It just writes. I think of Matthew Murdock. I mean, it's just detective work, detective stories, and Daredevil is a comic book where the focus on Matthew Murdock is just as interesting half the time as the focus when he's Daredevil. And what's incredible about the character of Matthew Murdock is that he's a blind lawyer. He's blind, and he's so interesting even when he's blind. That's what's so fascinating about him, and the inclination for anybody who writes him is to go introspective with Matthew Murdock, and Greg Rucka is really good at that. Now, Greg Rucka is particularly good at writing female characters as well, and I can't think of a character at Marvel that has more interesting female characters and love interests than Matthew Murdock. I mean, the guy seems to get lucky a lot. I mean, he even nailed a blind woman called Maya during Bendis's run. I mean, and he's done the Black Widow. He's done White Tech. I mean, he's done a whole slew of women that are pretty easy on the eyes. So, I mean, Tyrion fanboy in me just loves it.
Let's not forget about Elektra too.
Elektra, how can I forget Elektra? Good grief! But yeah, and Rucka has even written Elektra in the past, I believe. But the artist that I gave to him was Greg Capullo. I thought, in fact, if there's one criticism I have of Capullo at DC is he's always with Snyder. I think that's a big mistake. I think it's a mistake that DC made, and I think he's, I mean, I know that he gets along well with Snyder and everything, but I would separate the two. Because I want him to go outside his wheelhouse a little bit. Actually, to be quite blunt, Daredevil's not outside Capullo's wheelhouse because it's similar to Batman, but he needs a different writer. And I want to see him. I want to see how he is under a different writer. And I think Rucka. I'll be honest. I don't think Rucka is necessarily going to challenge him, but I just think it's the right. I think it's going to be it would be an interesting story because I think Greg Rucka tells some really great detective stories. He's good at the introspection. He's good at the character drama. He's good at writing female characters and he's really good at drawing out the angst and he's good at character highlights and character revelation, the way that they sort of creep up on you when you least expect it. Rucka's really good at that. And it's one of those things where put him with Capullo. I think, again, get him. It's going to be the year. It's going to be the year of ComicBoom and Dark Knight at Marvel here. So we got all these people on 12-issue runs. I think it's going to be epic. It's going to be like the true Marvel Knights reborn, back when Crusader and Palmiotti did it back in 2001. Everybody's going to be talking about Dark Knight and ComicBoom and then the new Marvel Knights for the 21st century. Man, I think this is really going to add to that whole PR campaign that we're going to put together.
Is our conglomerate like associative name? Are we Dark Knight Boom or are we Comic Nation? Like, I feel like Comic Nation is
Comic Nation, yeah, that'll work.
Comic Nation. I can't help but feel like Dark Knight Boom is just a fun way to associate our dynamic duo.
That's right. As long as we don't get sued by DC for saying Dark Knight at the beginning. So,
especially going to Marvel.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to the lawyers about that.
Yeah, I guess the safe pick is Comic Nation. Yeah, I think you have a great pick. I think Rucka is a phenomenal pick for Daredevil. He's a great character writer. He's incredible at setting up plot, which, like, for Daredevil does so well in kind of making a web of a plot, right? Like, it goes out in a couple different directions and then everything kind of culminates to one big story. He gets character. He knows how to write this type of character. I think Rucka is a phenomenal pick for Daredevil. I think Capullo is an interesting art pick because, I mean, first and foremost, you know, he's known for his Batman. He's known for his Spawn, which visually have some very similar dynamics to Daredevil. I think that's a really great pick, and that's a book that I would for sure, if you told me tomorrow that it was Greg Rucka and Capullo on Daredevil, I would run to the store and pick that up. For me, my pick for Daredevil, I think you're gonna like him. I chose Jeff Lemire on Daredevil. I think Jeff Lemire would do a really interesting job, kind of reassessing Matt Murdock's mental capacity. I think he would really play around with that, and I think that could tie in really well to kind of his undying faith in Catholicism, you know, and kind of reevaluate that relationship between how he's feeling mentally and how he expresses that in the way he follows God. And whether or not he wants to go that specific route, I just generally trust Jeff Lemire to do whatever the hell he wants to do because he's that good of a writer. He's a chameleon. He knows how to really get into the heads of these characters and vocalize them properly and characterize them well. For me, my artist needs to have a very specific colorist and a very specific inker, or at least a very specific style of coloring and inking, I think, because the artist I'm about to choose is very well known for being a little bit brighter. But I think that there are a lot of stylistic qualities in his art that would lend to Daredevil, and that's Rafa Sandoval. Rafa Sandoval drew a good portion of Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps by Venditti. He also drew a couple issues of Flash, and if there's one thing I can say about Rafa Sandoval is that he is the most kinetic artist in comics. Two-dimensional art by itself, not even taking into consideration the way he's laying out panels and how he's sequencing them. Just a single two-dimensional panel looks like things are moving. Daredevil needs to be moving. Daredevil is jumping about the city. He's dynamic. The action is going to be there. And again, if he's that good setting up single panels like that, imagine when he can control the sequence of panels. He's incredible at laying out a page. And I think, you know, if you get the right inker on him and the right colorist to kind of adapt that kineticism to a little bit of a darker aesthetic kind of cinematography, I think it would be perfect for Daredevil. And you know, I can't speak highly enough about these two creators and how well I think they would be for Daredevil.
Yeah. Great choices. Great choices. Sandoval on the art. Again, that's another one I'm embarrassed to say I'd never even crossed my mind when I was doing this, but you know, I'm jealous. I would have made that. I could have replaced him. Certainly on some of my choices. Yeah, absolutely. Great choice. It's hard to disagree with that. Yeah.
Well, the thing I
Impressive.
like about both of our Daredevil picks are, if you told me Greg Rucka or Jeff Lemire was on Daredevil, and I'm liking Chip Zdarsky, so I don't want to give off the impression that I'm hot to replace him. But if at any point in the future you were to mention either one of these two on Daredevil, I would jump for joy. I think they're both such great picks for the character.
Yeah, Lemire can pretty much write anything. I mean,
Yeah.
he really can. Right now, he's probably the most prolific writer out there right now. I don't think I could probably name all the titles that he's currently writing, because he's writing a lot right now.
Mhm.
He's writing. I don't think he's exclusive to anybody. He's writing indie. He's writing Marvel, DC. He's writing a lot.
Well, he's not doing any Marvel at the moment, but yeah, it's not like, you go back a couple months ago and he was doing Sentry for Marvel, so
Oh,
you know.
okay. All right.
But he's currently doing multiple books for DC between like The Question and The Killer Smile that just ended. So, Samoki dude, I know earlier had said Sean Phillips. Sean Phillips is an interesting pick for sure for Daredevil. I mean, he does a lot of Brubaker's detective-y stuff. I haven't seen Sean Phillips do like dynamic action, obviously because there needs to be a level of kineticism to the art watching Daredevil kind of jump around, swing around the city. But I think Sean Phillips is an interesting choice for Daredevil too in terms of art.
Yeah, sure.
Moving on to were you gonna say something, Boom? Sorry.
No, I was gonna say, I was just gonna see what we're gonna be doing next.
So the next pick, we're finally getting into, and the last two picks are Marvel's two biggest ensembles. I think we got to start with the X-Men. ComicBoom, what are you throwing at them?
This is one where when I think of the X-Men, I think of multiple titles, and I immediately thought of. I think right now, especially after Jonathan Hickman, after the New York Comic Con, and looking at remembering all the different titles, and I'm actually reading digitally from the preview copies of all the X titles that are coming out. I'm actually not collecting any of them, but I've read them all, so I'm actually very familiar with it. And I'll be quite blunt: most all of them are better than most of what I'm reading at DC. They're actually entertaining, and I should be buying the physical copies. Having said that, one thing I like about the X-Men titles at Marvel that I wouldn't want to change is that I like that some of them are light, some of them are darker, some of them are more humorous, and there's some of them are more action-packed. You go from the action-packed of X-Force, and then you get the more crazy. You get the Excalibur, and then you get the then the hard punch Wolverine, and then the sort of the eclectic, uncanny X-Men. There's always something there. So this was a tough choice for me. So if I'm just picking for uncanny X-Men, I do think when I think of uncanny X-Men, even under Hickman, I always think Hickman is really challenging Marvel readers. He's certainly challenging non-mutant experts like myself with his writing, but I don't mind being challenged, and I'm up for the task. I find Uncanny X-Men is generally speaking, I find it a hard comic book to get into at the best of times. Having said that, you got to cater to that core Marvel fan base, which I think should be a priority. And I went with Scott Snyder, and I realized that he disappointed me on Justice League. But Snyder disappointing me on Justice League, it's only because he wants to finish his epic story in Death Metal. And so cutting Snyder some slack. And quite frankly, X-Men, I can't think of a more cynical, depressing group of people than X-Men. And it's why I've never, seriously, they're the most depressing heroes anywhere. I mean, X-Men they're a depressing lot by nature. They're cynical. They think humanity's against them. They want to form their own group, their own island Krakoa. They're arrogant and narcissistic enough to believe that collectively, that somehow just because they're born with a different gene, that they should all form a group and form their own nation because of a genetic aberration. Please. But it is what it is. You can't get a more cynical writer right now than Scott Snyder. He would be perfect for them, because even after they'd win, they would lose. And that's, and I know I sound like a smartass saying this, but I actually do think Snyder's a good fit for the X-Men, because every now and then I think of his epic moment in Justice League 25, where Superman and Jonathan Kent and his father, John Kent, he's hitting the World Forger, and it's an epic moment drawn by Jose Jimenez. It's a fantastic epic moment after a relentless series of depressing issues. I can see him doing that with X-Men, and I can see a bunch of Marvel zombies having a geekasm over it. So I would put Snyder on there. As for the artist, you already picked him for another. You already picked him for, I believe, I can't remember who you picked him for, but it's Doug Mankey. I was trying to write down all your choices here, but anyways, Doug Mankey is my go-to. I love him on Justice League. He's great at drawing team books. Doug Mankey, Scott Snyder on Uncanny X-Men. He's got the versatility. He's got those strong, crisp, clear, bold lines, and he can draw anger and angst, and I just love when he draws action sequences, and he can draw hulking people as well, and he's good at drawing musculature, which I think for the X-Men, it's very visceral, it's in your face, and he draws gorgeous women as well. So Snyder and Mankey are my choices.
I think it's an interesting pick. Unfortunately, my confidence in Snyder has been fleeting as of the last 2 years. So, I think the pick is interesting for sure. Regarding Snyder, I think Mankey is a great pick. I definitely considered him for X-Men. By the way, I put him on Hulk. I know you were trying to figure that out. Yeah, I mean, he's art wise. I think that the book would be really interesting. I think Mankey is really good at making these big kind of Olympian style bodies feel like they could be walking around instead of that kind of Ed McGuinness style, like, wow, they look like you put those huge like bubble wraps like under the clothes. I think it's an interesting pick for sure. I think at the very least, putting Snyder on X-Men is a wonderful experiment, if given that limited time. So I think it was interesting for me. My approach to X-Men isn't really anything like what's happening with current X-Men. Jonathan Hickman is doing a lot of world building, and he's looking to kind of bring the X-Men into their own kind of sphere. You know what I mean? Like he's broadening that world and that empire and making them their own society and their own race of people. My approach to X-Men is going to be very team drama based. It's going to be very emotion based. It's going to focus on the relationships of the X-Men characters and how that impacts their ability to function as, essentially a paramilitary mutant force. And that's Peter Tomasi. I would put Peter Tomasi on the X-Men. He's proven that he loves that he'll do the research, that he'll dig deep into what makes these characters who they are. I think Peter Tomasi is one of the best in comics at characterizing pre-existing characters. I think he's great with dialogue, and proven in his Superman, in his Batman and Robin, he knows how to pull the emotional drama and the emotional stakes out of these characters, and how to make every individual character's emotional state interact with one another. And I think that it would network well. So I think Peter Tomasi would be an interesting job. Again, it is very different from what's going on now with X-Men, very character-based. Artist-wise, I'm picking an artist who doesn't necessarily get headlines, but I think he's very talented. I think he deserves his time in the sun, and that's Robson Roca. He's a Brazilian artist. Did a lot of Kelly Sue DeConnick's Aquaman. He did that special issue of Teen Titans, which I have the original page for that you guys can't see because it's pencils. And he did a lot on Green Lantern. He's dynamic. I think that the way he models characters are really, really, really cool. It feels like classic comic books, but updating it for the modern age. I think he's excellent at character acting. We can see them move, and it feels lively. It feels vivid, and I just think he deserves an opportunity to be put on a big spotlight book. And what better than to throw him on the X-Men with somebody like Peter Tomasi? And I think Peter Tomasi's kind of ability to pull the emotion out of these characters would suit Robson Roca really well. And on top of that, Robson Roca draws incredible action. So, yeah.
Yeah. I feel like complaining because I thought we would go through this whole stream and I would be the only one identifying and remembering Robson Roca, but you beat me to it. But I put him on our last pick, or something else. But I love Robson Roca. That's absolutely a fantastic choice. And yeah, your choice. I just it would, it's interesting. I would not have thought of putting Tomasi on the X-Men, only because I have a hard time transitioning and imagining Tomasi going from detective and the Superman, Super Sons, and detective work. I have a hard time imagining him on the X-Men for some reason, and I'm not going to be very good at articulating why. So I suppose that means that it's maybe a good idea, because it does catch me off guard, which sometimes is a really good thing. Because whenever I look at a new series and I think, well, why did they put him on that? It's like, well, I'm not going to lie, it prompts me to pick the title up, because hearing what you said though about Tomasi, because I know that you Dark Knight, you interviewed him in New York City at the Comic-Con. I know that you respect him greatly. So do I. He's a great person. He's a great person to talk to. He's very personable. You're right. He's very passionate. He gets right into the characters. I do like his latest work on Detective. Has been interesting. I like what he did with Mr. and Mrs. Freeze there. Some issues with the storyline, but there's no
Agreed.
question that he's got a passion for the characters, notwithstanding the issues what that one might have with how he, ended that particular story. The fact is, I agree with you about his passion, and it does come through. And that's a very interesting pick. And to be very blunt, because I'm really not all that huge an X-Men fan, I'm inclined to say, why not? Why not put Gleason on there? I would certainly have no issue with that at all, because I gotta tell you, I've always checked out X-Men over the years. He's certainly had people on the X-Men that I think shouldn't have been put on there, but Gleason is definitely one of them. And by the way, when I spoke earlier about all the different different X-Men books, I would choose Tomasi and Gleason for New Mutants. Because now that's a very cliche choice and not very outside the box, like as brave as what you said for X-Men. I just think that they're really good at writing younger characters, and you even said with the X-Men you make maybe a younger approach to the X-Men. I think they're ideally suited for New Mutants. As editor-in-chief, I would promise Tomasi and Gleason that we're not going to age up any of their characters by 7 years in the middle of a run. Okay, we're not going to play those games. And while he's at Marvel, we're not going to hire back Bendis. So relax, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah, in the chat, I noticed a couple of people earlier were like, "Oh, give Bendis back to Marvel." I don't want to give Bendis to anybody because I want good comics. So let's put that out there. I mean, if I can just kind of, take one final stance to try to help you to understand exactly why I picked Tomasi. If you look at what he's done, and I think his most beloved books as of late, his Superman, his Super Sons, his Batman and Robin, the stories were very interesting, and he's excellent at plot. But what drove us to love them? The way he makes the characters interact, the way he digs down deep into why these characters need to be in a scene together, why there's some sort of emotional chemistry or dissonance. And the X-Men, I don't care what anybody says, is a drama. The X-Men is a drama. It's a soap opera with people who have powers. That's what it is. And what does drama mean? It's characters. It's emotion. It's people getting pissed off at each other. It's people being petty. It's watching the reactions. And I think that, Peter Tomasi is so good at finding the chemistry between characters and why they either click or why they make kind of compelling adversity for one another, that I think he's a no-brainer for X-Men, at least to give him a shot at playing with those dynamics. I mean, there's so much good, like, juicy drama in the X-Men. Obviously the love triangle between Logan and Cyclops and Jean, the ambiguity of Mystique, Professor X's kind of narcissism, and ability to withhold. And he's just good at characterization. And naturally, when you're seeing somebody write an ensemble, I think a lot of writers tend to lose a handful of characters along the way. They don't know how to
Yeah.
write them, and I think Tomasi would really make sure that we're getting these characters acting and sounding like how they should be. So, that's kind of my rationale for putting Tomasi in the X-Men.
Well, you sold me. You sold me. That's I can't disagree with anything you just said. You articulated that very well.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. So I guess our final pick for the night is Marvel's gem, the book that moves the needle, Avengers. Comic
Well,
Boom. I know one part of yours has kind of gone. You might have revealed the artist, which
yeah.
I think is a good pick, by the way. But I'm really curious to who you're essentially allowing to shape the Marvel universe.
Well, and again, I don't know if this is not going to be a shocker. I the person that I'm appointing to Avengers, and I do think it's risky because I'll even admit that I don't have 100% faith in Robert Venditti. That was my choice. Now, Robert Venditti he's done a good job with Hawkman. All right, everyone sings his praises. I really liked his work on Freedom Fighters. He did a good job of taking an ensemble cast with Freedom Fighters, and this Freedom Fighters. My concern was it's a great series that nobody read.
Yeah.
I mean, good grief! I don't know why more people didn't read this. And of course, it was drawn by the immaculate Eddie Burrows, and great artist. Really good series. Venditti can write character moments, and he can really get to the emotional parts of a moment when he really wants to. At the same time, though, Robert Venditti's my criticism of him is sometimes he gets a little bit too decompressed. I think he's improved somewhat because I actually thought during his Green Lantern run where I think he really found his form as a writer during his long Green Lantern stint. I felt that hindered him a little bit in certain times because it encouraged, in a bad way, his inclination toward decompression. But he moved away from that. His Hawkman, his 12-issue run on Hawkman, I actually think as good as that was, he was a little bit decompressed. But I think he did that to serve the artist, Brian Hitch, whose art, I think he expanded some of the action sequences to benefit the artist in Hawkman. That's just a theory I have. I might be wrong. But in any event, I think that Venditti, and I've got nothing to base this on, I think he works well with others. I think he works well with an artist. I think he finds a way to work well with the artist. He did that with Freedom Fighters with Eddie Burrows. He did that with Brian Hitch on Hawkman. I think that he gets it. He understands that this is a collaborative process. And I think that he's really good at coming up with some great ideas for stories. And with Robson Rocca, I mean, the latest issue with Aquaman issue 57. By the way, I'm wearing this Aquaman ensemble here. I just finished doing like 3 different reviews, and one of them was Aquaman 57. Aquaman and Mira have a daughter, and so this is my way of celebrating that. I think it's a key issue. People should pick it up. In any event, Robson Rocca is so good at. I mean, that issue of Aquaman, the latest one, he's so good at drawing action and emotion and conveying the importance of a scene. And there's a civil war going on in Atlantis where they're all rushing to the hospital and they all need medical attention. And in the midst of this, here's their queen coming in. She's pregnant. She's injured from being damaged by the Black Manta, defeating Black Manta with her aquakinesis, but she puts herself into a coma and she's got to give birth at the same time. It's just chaos and the emotion expressed by Aquaman and the love, and he's really good at expressing, conveying all that. And I think Avengers, at their heart, Avengers are at their best when they're a team that cares for each other. Now I realize Tony Stark's no longer really an active as Iron Man, but the scenes. But She-Hulk has a relationship with Thor currently in Avengers, and Captain Marvel at least had a relation or was closer, was considered Tony Stark a best friend. There's always a lot of drama there. We've got to remember that the Marvel universe, this is a universe that Civil War 1 and 2. I mean, these are heroes that almost sometimes, just when you think they're getting along, they're not. Mm-hmm. And there's drama out of the blue. And there's one thing that Marvel seems to inherently do better than DC is to capture character moments where characters are in disagreement with each other and can fundamentally disagree with each other, but yet be heroic and come up with some pretty cool storylines at the same time. And I think they have that over DC. And I think Robert Venditti is the type of guy that can really capture those moments and in a story, and whatever that story would be. And I think Robson Rocket would be the perfect guy to illustrate that.
I think you have an excellent pick. I champion Venditti heavily. The guy does his research. He makes sure that whatever these characters are doing, that it feels like something these characters would do. Obviously, he is an excellent ensemble writer. Freedom Fighters was wonderful. His Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns was incredible. That was such a phenomenal cast book, and he really knows how to tap into what makes these characters special. I think he is one of two people that know how to write Guy Gardner properly. His take on Guy Gardner was so good. And again, the Freedom Fighters, he was able to take those characters and develop this cast that, you know, just felt authentic and organic. And aside from that, the guy just knows how to plot a story. The guy knows how to plot great story. And I, you know, I'm very excited for his Justice League because even if it doesn't push the needle, I know the story's going to be good. I only fear that he's not getting the impact and the kind of authority on Justice League that he should have because of DC's upcoming 5G, and they're probably not allowing anybody to kind of take those stances. But I think Venditti's a fantastic pick for an ensemble cast like the Avengers. He's somebody who I would trust with the general Marvel mythology and to shape it. Robson Roca, I already sung my praises about him. He's a great artist. He's high impact. He's cinematic, he's one of those artists that don't stray so far from, I guess, what would be considered, you know, technical comic book art. It still feels very comic booky, and yet he's able to render it in a way that doesn't feel two-dimensional or stiff. It always feels like it's moving. So I think you have a great pick for an Avengers run. I really, really like it.
I'm really curious, Dark Knight. I'm really curious as to what your choice is to put on Marvel Comics' foremost premier superhero team, Avengers. What did you pick?
I think that this was the writer was by far the most predictable. This person is the best architect that DC has ever had. This person has had their hand writing Avengers for Marvel, but I think now that this person is developed, I think that Jeff Johns would be a phenomenal choice for the Avengers. I think you let him shape the Marvel Universe. I think that you let him remind you why the Marvel Universe is so special and what makes it, such an endearing and iconic brand. I think that he knows how to bring out the best in these characters and in very unique ways. He makes very inspired choices. I know his Justice League during the New 52 was very split. I love his Justice League. I think that Dark War, although it wasn't an easy read when you're keeping up to date with it, I think in trade is excellent. I think the guy's a world builder. And first and foremost, whoever is on Avengers needs to be able to build the mythology and be the one to set the tone for the rest of the universe. And that's Jeff Johns. My artist, and I'm surprised I haven't seen him on any of your picks. He's proven, he's a hot young artist. I think he can draw pretty much anything. I think that he's great at making pages just look iconic. And that's Jorge Jimenez. Jorge Jimenez is such a phenomenal talent at DC right now. I think you could put him on anything. He can do Bright. He can do Superman. You can put him in Gotham. He's really, really interesting when it comes to texture. He knows how to do casts and have multiple iconic characters on the screen, so to speak, without feeling overwhelming. And I think that having these two together would pair for such an excellent Avengers tale.
I think your choices are really good. With respect to Johns, I thought I wasn't sure that he was available. If I'd have known Johns was available, I never really, I forgot that he's writing Shazam. To be quite honest, I just think of him as sort of like being off in TV land. But there's, how can you possibly go wrong with Jeff Johns on anything? Jeff Johns is not the writer. He's not the type of writer that will write something he's not passionate about to begin with. And I think he's written an Avengers story already. I think
he has, but it was very early in his career. So the reason I decided to like bring that up is because I think obviously he's just developed as a writer, you know.
Certainly. Oh no, there's no question he has. And he definitely he understands the team dynamic. I think better than anyone. And as you've often pointed out, we talked about it on a couple of streams already. This is the guy that brought in that harkened in the emotional spectrum that really put the Green Lantern mythology on the map. And can you imagine Jeff Johns writing an epic Avengers tale when he has the Infinity Stones or Infinity Gems to work with? Now, I realize that mythology in Marvel is now changing, and the Infinity Stones are now becoming imbued within certain individuals across the galaxy, I think, in Marvel lore. So Marvel's currently exploring that mythology. The new character in Marvel called Star has the Reality Stone embedded in her, and that's the source of her power. So that mythology of the Infinity Stones is really expanding in the Marvel universe. And what better guy to maybe harken in some new, fresh ideas to build on that than Jeff Johns? I think that's a fantastic idea. My only reason why I wouldn't want Jeff Johns is because I'm a selfish bastard as a DC fan. I don't want Marvel to get all his good ideas. I want him to stay at DC. I want to mine this guy's creative genius for DC, not Marvel. But let's face it, if Marvel hires us, man, we're going to get the best of the best, and we're going to pay what it has to be paid to get him over there. So that's a great choice.
Yeah, and I think, just putting him in the position of being the chief architect of a universe and driving it. And the thing I love about Jeff Johns is he's able to do that while also being respectful to the individual creators. So just looking at the dynamic in the creator space of Marvel, I think that he would create a story that is impactful, but that doesn't make everything else going on around it feel meaningless, like it can at times.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy knows character. He knows what makes them special. He knows how to bring out the best in these characters. And I think that, you give it to Jeff Johns, and I think he takes, a B-list Avengers character, makes them important. And, again, the guy just knows how to craft a universe. The guy is an incredible world builder. And, art-wise, Jorge Jimenez is just, he's so dynamic. His aesthetic style has so many great influences from both Eastern and Western style comics. And, I just think that pairing the two together would be really interesting. I think that it has a lot of promise, but I'm also really curious for everybody who's watching us right now. What is your final say? What is your ultimate pick for an Avengers creative team? I do want to kind of read some of those out right before we close out. But yeah, I mean I think we both had some pretty good picks for the Avengers. I wouldn't complain for either one of those runs.
Yeah. Snyder on the X-Men. I'm just reading the chat. Joel Hill take a stab at a Brood arc. Yeah, I guess. I don't know what the Brood. That must be something to do with the X-Men, the Brood, right?
Yeah. He's an X-Men character. I mean, I'm not super deeply steeped in X-Men mythology. I'm very a moderate X-Men fan, so I don't know a lot about Brood, but I'll take it from you, Scott. I'll let you take the reins on your Brood arc, and we'll let Joe Hill do it, at least for the purposes of a thought experiment for sure. Some Okie Dude says he wants Venditti or Tomasi on Avengers. I'm cool with those too. Obviously, if I think Tomasi can write most anything. So I think Tomasi would be able to make that shift from a little bit of a character drama to, just some classic superhero comics with big stakes. So I wouldn't complain with Tomasi on Avengers. How would you feel about something like that, Boom?
Well, as I said, I find that I don't know. That's a tough one for me because I'm not inclined to. I would be reluctant to put Tomasi on that large a team of book. To be, I don't know. I don't know if he would. It would be a risk. I would consider that an interesting choice. I think it would be a risk. I don't know if he's really shown. Mind you, he's never really been challenged with a team book, has he?
Really.
Maybe I'm not giving him a fair shot here. I'm just thinking now he has written detective, and there was there's the Batman family, and there's always that team dynamic. And who's to say he can't? I guess it's like I say, it's a little bit out. I would be uncomfortable with it, but I could be convinced.
Hmm. Yeah, it'd be interesting. And then, just regarding the team books, Solo Rebirth says, I honestly don't care for X-Men. I don't know anyone on my generation that loves the X-Men. Only character we love is Wolverine. Yeah, I mean, I'm not much older than you, Solo Rebirth. I'm 22, and I think that the the spectacle of the X-Men has kind of been lost on our generation, mostly because, especially after losing the movie rights, it seems like Marvel really floundered in the publishing department. It's like the 90s and the 80s, the people that were reading X-Men around that time that truly love them. There was Grant Morrison's X-Men run, which I think is very, very good and widely credited. I admittedly, I had to go back and my basis for the X-Men is based in back issues, and stories that people told me to read to try to understand parts of X-Men's convoluted history. So I certainly don't blame you. So one thing I want to do also before we close out, Boom, is I want to go through real quick and just recap what each one of us had. But I'm really curious, and once I recap my list, I would like to know if you had to veto as my creative partner one of the teams that I put on a book, which would it be? So I guess we'll go down the list. So we started with Cap. Let's just re-summarize for the folks at home. What were your picks on Captain America?
Sean Gordon Murphy, for
Okay.
both writer and artist.
And mine was Robert Venditti on writing duties and Carlo Paguyana on art. Next was Thor.
Thor, I had James Tiny in the fourth with Ivan Reese.
I had Brian Azzarello and Eddie Barrows. Moving into Iron Man.
Iron Man, I had Tom King on writer and Martino Bueno is the artist.
All right. I had Greg Rucka on writing duties and Dexter Soy on art. Your Hulk.
My Hulk, I had Brian Azzarello and Eddie Burrows.
And I have Tom King and Doug Monkey. We have Spider-Man.
I had Adam Glass, Brett Booth on Spider-Man.
I had Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo. Daredevil.
Daredevil, I had Rucka and Capullo. Greg Rucka and Capullo.
For Old Hornhead, I have Jeff Lemire and Rafa Sandoval. Moving into the X-Men.
X-Men, I had Snyder and Doug Mankey.
X-Men, I have Tomasi and Robson Roca. And finally, Avengers.
Avengers, Venditti, I had Robert Venditti and Robson Roca on Avengers.
All right, Comic Boom. Now, as my creative partner, you hear my pitches for the Marvel Universe revolving around bringing some DC creators in.
Who did you have on Avengers again? Sorry, who did you have on Avengers?
Avengers, I had Jeff Johns and Jorge Jimenez.
Right.
So if you, as my creative partner, you say, Dark Knight Nation, I know we're pals, but I don't think that this creative team will work in the best interest of our shared Marvel universe. What are you vetoing, my friend?
You know what? Man, this is tough. You know what? I swear to God, there's only one of yours that even only one of you that and that's I would, if I had to veto one, because they're all really good. I swear to God, I'm not just saying this because you and I we have it out in our arguments. We're not afraid to be honest with each other. I straight up really love your choices. If I had to veto one, I would have to, and you made such a good argument, but I would veto Tomasi and Robson Roca off X-Men. And it's not because of Robson Roca. It's just that I don't have enough faith with Tomasi on a team book. Even though you made a good argument there, this is a real tough choice for me. I like your wild cards. I don't want to get rid of your wild card there. The way that you assigned you had a couple there that were a little out there, but I kind of liked them, but I would replace Tomasi and Robson Rucka.
Interesting. It's not the one I expected. I thought you were going to
What
say
did you
Spider-Man.
expect?
I thought
What's
you were
that?
going to pick my Spider-Man.
You mean Snyder?
Yeah.
You're, well, the thing is, I like that. I like the wild card aspect of Snyder on Spider-Man. It's gonna force him out of his wheelhouse a little bit, and there's always got to be that wild card aspect. To me, I think Tomasi is, I don't know, that would be the second veto, probably the Snyder. But like I said, I don't like vetoing any of yours, to be honest. I really do like them all. They're all pretty good.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I don't think either one of us would veto any of the artists we chose. I think it really comes down to writing.
They're all great artists. I mean, I love Tomasi, so I hate vetoing the guy off anything. To be honest, Snyder kind of pissed me off. Maybe I should change it to Snyder because he pissed me off with JL39. I say that with love, but
Yeah.
I mean, right now I'm liking Tomasi more than Snyder. So if find me in a different mood, I'll veto Snyder. But no, I'll stick with my original. I'll veto Tomasi on X-Men.
Gotcha. Well, quick thing, we got somebody joining us. Jack B, greetings from Michigan. How are you, man? Thank you for joining us tonight. Hope you're enjoying the show. For me, I don't have an issue with any of your artists. I think all of your artists were great picks for each individual character and/or ensemble. There were two that I'm kind of hopping between.
Yeah.
If I'm hopping on the Snyder train, I might say X-Men.
Right.
As of right now, I don't trust Snyder on ensemble books. I think, besides the fact that when he tends to go grand scheme, I don't think that Snyder is able to contain himself. He's not able to be grand and yet have some level of consensus. I think he goes a little bit too far out there beyond reach. And I think that when it comes to characterizing characters in an ensemble, he'll focus on maybe 3 or 4 characters that he knows, write them well, and will have them act as the characters he knows and love, and then he kind of just loses the rest. I have a lot of complaints about the way he writes Barry Allen in Justice League. I also don't think many people know how to write Barry Allen, but I think he really lost Barry Allen. I think at times he might have become a little bit too narrow on the direction of Wonder Woman and things of that nature. Otherwise, if I'm not hopping on the Snyder train, I don't know how I feel about Tynion on Thor. I like Tynion, I really do, and he proved himself kind of writing the supernatural in Justice League Dark, but that also kind of has a very kind of like spooky, not necessarily horror, but I guess spooky is the right term. And I don't know if I'm 100% trusting him to do something as big and ranging as the mythology behind Thor. I think I would ultimately give him a shot, and if I could really kind of set my foot down, it might be on Snyder, but I'm also on and I love the guy, so let me stick it out there, but I'm kind of on an anti-Snyder train right now. It might be because he went from being my favorite writer in comics that I would put on absolutely any book to, not writing a story as a whole that I've loved in a couple of years. So maybe it's just, I fell from too high of a mountain on Snyder. And boom, when you get me talking about something that I like from Snyder, I'll go at it. I mean, we did a video on Batman writers and talking about the central themes of Snyder, and I wouldn't shut the fuck up until I got you to agree with me. So I can be very passionate about him, but I think ultimately I might veto him on. I don't put him on an ensemble.
I don't. It's hard for me to. I wouldn't give you a lot of pushback on the vetoes for either of those. Snyder and Tynion both worked together on Justice League during that 39 issue run. They whenever Snyder would write for 5 or 6 issues, and then Tynion would come on and do an exposition-filled issue, and they tag teamed a little bit, and ultimately they failed to adequately explain the 7 forces. They didn't do a particularly good job with that. There's a whole parts of that narrative that might not never ever be explored until another writer take them up to task. So they didn't necessarily coordinate very well together, despite Justice League having some big moments. So if telling me that you don't trust Snyder on an ensemble, a large cast, I don't, it would be hard for me to argue with that. I guess it's one of those things where I could, the only defense I'd say is, well, maybe he learned something, maybe give him a chance.
Yeah.
But then the same thing could be said with Tomasi on X-Men. So
yeah, no, for sure. I mean, overall, you have some really interesting picks. I think if I had to say my favorite picks of yours are your Daredevil and your Hulk. I think your Daredevil and your Hulk were really, really cool picks. And if you had told me that either of those books were going to be shaping up with those creative teams, I would run out to pick those up off the shelves. So I'm curious, are there any particular picks of mine that you were most fond of?
You had your Hulk. Oh, the problem is that I have a mess. I got messy pages here, and I wrote. What was your Hulk again?
My Hulk was King and Doug Monk.
That's what it was, because I had Tom King on Iron Man, and I actually think that Tom King might be a better choice for Hulk because psychologically Hulk is more screwed up than Tony Stark. So that I like. Tom King on Hulk. I for some reason that never occurred to me. So your choice on Hulk would probably have been my favorite in terms of what Tom King could do with 12 issues with the Hulk would be. I'd really be curious to see that. I really would, because no matter how crazy he would go with that, that's a really good choice, because you almost can't screw up an interpretation of the Hulk because it's the Hulk, and he has that healing factor, and he can overcome anything anyway. And so it's easy to undo any damage to the Hulk because he's the Hulk.
Yeah.
It's almost like writing Wolverine. But anyways, I would go with your choice on Hulk. That's probably would be my most, I think the most interesting and out there, and the one that I would grab off the stand more so than anything else.
Cool. All right. We have and just a quick comment on the Hulk. Yeah, I mean the Hulk has automatic get out of jail free cards, which is helpful in an industry where you so often have the creative reins switching hands. We have in the chat Solo Rebirth. I remember asking a friend on my AP Gov class if he's reading X-Men, and he was like, "Who the hell cares about X-Men? Read Batman by Tynion instead. It's amazing." Yeah, I mean, they're two very different books. They are two very, very different books. And quick plug, I just gave my thoughts on Tynion's Batman run thus far. I think it was 2 days ago. And
check out Dark Knight's review of Batman. I actually reviewed I did a quick review of Batman '89, and in my review when I posted, I actually said go check out Dark Knight because yours is far more detailed, and I take a different angle. I talk more about the speculation on it than the content per se, but definitely check out Dark Knight. A very detailed analytical review of Tynion's run so far. It's very, very good.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for those of you who are watching today, as we're streaming it, there's one more day left for you to be able to enter in to win a digital copy of Batman number 86, which is the first issue of the arc. So, for those of you who are eligible, go check out the video and figure out how you can enter and win. But, aside from that, go check out ComicBoom's review as well, because he takes, again, a very different approach from how I take it, but he's going to provide you with a perspective that I physically am not able to do as well on my type of review. So make sure you guys go do that. ComicBoom, we're nearing 2 hours here, my friend. It was a fantastic conversation.
Yes.
Are there any final words you want to give to the viewers out there? And do you want to let everybody know what you're up to on your channel?
Well, I review mostly DC Comics. Coming up in the next probably 12 hours, I'll be uploading a review of Flash Forward number 6, Batman '89, and Aquaman 57. I talk about that. And throughout those videos, I would just encourage everyone to have some faith with DC. They're going through some struggles right now. And, let's keep our fingers crossed. I don't know what's in store for DC. I don't know if 5G is going to happen or not. But I think we're in some very tumultuous times. But I think we're in some very exciting times too.
Mm.
And there's nothing that sometimes even when sometimes when creative teams are pissed off and there's shuffles, sometimes you get some gems. You get some gems, and that needle in the haystack will show itself. I mean, a quick note on Batman '89. James Tynion the Fourth has given a couple of interviews. He had no idea that Punchline would explode like she was, and you could tell because he never really wrote her as that significant a character in Batman '89, and she's getting now. He's talking with the higher ups are talking with him about giving her more prominence, and because he was unexpected. We're supposed to be looking at the designer, but we're not supposed to be focusing on Punchline. But
Mm.
it's amazing how when you have a passion like Tinian the Fourth has, he finally got his chance to write Batman, and he focused on the story, and he just focuses on telling the best story that he can. And lo and behold, one of his secondary characters, even unbeknownst to him, explodes on the market. And it just goes to show you that if you write with passion and if you care about the characters, no matter how small, the character that you might least expect it is going to become super popular and really. And in this case, it's popular with speculators, but you can bet dollars to donuts that Punchline is going to be a character, since he already said it's if the Harley Quinn is the angel on one side of the Joker, Punchline is the devil on the other. So kudos, congratulations to Tinian the Fourth, and to all us fans of DC. Man, let's stick with it and say a few prayers. And if you're not religious, pray to whatever god you worship in Thor mythology to make sure that everything goes well for DC in the coming months.
Yeah, you make a good point. I think the one thing to just kind of just to bring up here is, as much as we criticize these publishers and these stories or the directions that they're taking, it's ultimately because we care, because we want these stories to be good. And to some degree it is a cathartic experience to get those thoughts out there, and maybe with the fantasy of somebody who's in power hearing us and making those changes, who knows. But ultimately, we draw those complaints because we want these stories to be great, and we want them to succeed, and we want the industry to flourish. You guys, if you're not already, I know many of you are, but please make sure you guys click in the link in the description below. Check out ComicBoom's channel and subscribe. He puts up content anywhere from like 3 to 4 times a week. It's all spectacular. I watch him more than I watch any other comic book YouTuber on the internet. So I would highly implore you guys to go do that. Subscribe to his channel, check him out. Him and I, now that I'm kind of getting myself back in the game, you will be seeing him on the channel a hell of a lot more. And you'll be seeing me over there as well. We've already done some fantastic videos on his channel. We discussed our thoughts and speculations the day that we heard of DC's Dan DiDio's departure from DC Comics. We did the sister video to this one where we drafted Marvel creators to DC titles, which I think was one of my favorite conversations that we've had. And aside from that, his independent content is great. So you guys make sure you go check him out.
Thanks for the shout out.
Yeah, man. Anytime. So, finally, again, this has been Let's Talk Comics, a wonderful conversation with my friend Comic Boom. If you guys like this video, please make sure to leave a like so we know that this is something you guys are interested in us approaching. Maybe we'll do something later where we draft independent creators to the big two, or something to that extreme. We always pride ourselves in coming up with conversations that not a lot of people are generating on the internet. Make sure you go check out the slew of videos that Comic Boom is about to post and has posted. Make sure you guys check out my thoughts on Batman 86 through 89 by James Tynion. And we'll be coming at you with more great content. So I want to thank Comic Boom for hopping on the stream with me and sitting down and talking comics. And I want to thank everybody who's watching us live for joining in and giving their thoughts and speculation, and giving the consideration to our thoughts on where we think these universes should be heading towards. So thank you guys for watching. And this has been Dark Knight Nation and Comic Boom.
Catch you later.